In this third segment, we're going to be talking about the digestion and absorption of fats. So fat digestion begins in the mouth, where a small amount of fat will be digested by lingual lipase. So anytime you see the word lipase, this is going to refer to an enzyme that breaks down fat. So like we had amylase that breaks down carbohydrates or starch, lipases will break down fat. And lingual is just referring to that it's coming from the mouth. The fat will then pass to the stomach. No digestion of fat will take place in the stomach, just like no digestion of carbohydrate takes place here. The only thing that's digested in the stomach is protein. What fat does in the stomach is that it's floating. So remember that fat is an emulsifier. So the fatty part is really just going to kind of float there in the watery part of your stomach. But there's no digestion here. In the stomach, it's going to be mixed into chyme. We talked about that mixture before in our digestion lesson. And then that chyme will pass to the small intestine, which again is the main source of digestion overall, but it's also the main site of fat digestion. So bile, which is produced by the liver and stored in the gallbladder, is going to be transported to the small intestine. The bile will emulsify the fat so that it can be broken down. And this emulsified fat will then be digested by pancreatic lipase. So again, lipase means it will break down lipids or fat, and pancreatic means that it's coming from the pancreas into the small intestine. When the fat is broken down, it's broken into free fatty acids, glycerol, and monoglycerides. The digestive tract absorbs triglycerides pretty efficiently. So 98% of the triglycerides will be absorbed. So fat digestion is really efficient. There's very little fat that is excreted by a healthy digestive system. So if someone has fatty stools, this could be an indication that something else is going on because there shouldn't be any fat, or there should be relatively little fat excreted from a healthy individual. And again, remember from our first segment that fat digestion is really slow. It slows down the digestive process, meaning that this also results in us feeling full when we have a lot of fat because of those satiating feelings that can come from fat. So again, satiety is referring to those feelings of fullness. This figure is figure 5.7 from your textbook, and it is a great overview of the digestion and absorption of fats. So it's basically what was on the previous slide, just in picture format, and it really goes step by step of what's going on. So I would encourage you to review that. Once the fats are broken down, the fat must be transported so it can be used by the body. So those glycerol and the shorter chain fatty acids will be absorbed directly into the bloodstream at the intestinal lining. Larger lipid fragments will be converted back into triglycerides and then combined with protein. And this will form chylomicrons that are going to be carried in the lymph. So we can see that our fats are going to be transferred in two different mediums, so both the bloodstream and the lymph. Lipoproteins are how the fat is going to be transported in the body, and these are a mixture of fat and protein. And again, these are really the transport vehicles for both blood and lymph. And our different classes or types of lipoproteins are listed below. So we have chylomicrons, VLDL, LDL, and HDL, and I'll explain what all of those are in a couple of slides. Fat is the main storage form of fuel in our body. So again, carbohydrates are a preferred fuel source, especially for short-term fuel, but any sort of excess energy that is consumed will be stored as fat. So our body has these fat depots or deposits that are basically serving as our rainy day energy. So again, in times of starvation, when we're sick, when we're not consuming enough energy overall, our body can draw on these fat stores and use that for energy. And again, remember that excess carbohydrate or excess anything really will be stored as fat. When there's this need for energy, so when we're in this time of starvation or we're in this time of inadequate energy intake over time, triglycerides will be broken down. The fatty acids will then be released back into the blood, and they'll be broken down into smaller fragments, and then these will be combined with glucose-derived fragments, and this will help to provide energy from the body. Carbohydrates or glucose make this process more efficient, so this is, again, why we really like to have glucose or carbohydrates in our diet, because they're very important. when there's inadequate carbohydrate or not enough carbohydrate, the fat won't be broken down completely, and it will actually cause ketosis. So you can look back into the chapter on carbohydrates to review what ketosis is. But basically, in times of very low carbohydrate intake, the body will produce ketones. So when there's not enough carbohydrate, that fat breakdown, when we need the energy, is not going to be very efficient either. So both adequate carbohydrate and fat intake are very important. Let's take a closer look at the types of lipoproteins. So again, our chylomicrons are transporting the fat around the body. So with these, it's important to know what is being carried and where is it being carried to. So we have our very low density lipoproteins, or VLDL. These carry triglycerides and other lipids that are made in the liver to the body cells for use. Our LDL, or our low density lipoprotein, transport cholesterol to other lipids and tissues. And these are made from VLDL. And then we have our high-density lipoproteins, or HDL, which carry cholesterol away from body cells to the liver for disposal. So what you should note here is that high-density, or HDLs, are carrying cholesterol away, so it's not going to be used. It's getting rid of it. Whereas the VLDL and LDL are going to be carrying that cholesterol or triglycerides or other lipids to different tissues for storage. So these two are generally not a very good thing. Specifically, LDL and HDL are both very important because they have the greatest impact on the risk of heart disease. Specifically, high or increased LDL and low or decreased HDL increases the risk of heart disease the most. And we'll talk more about what this means as we go. So this is a nice picture comparing LDL and HDL the lipoproteins. So you can see the makeup of these. So our HDL definitely have higher protein content, where our LDLs are made up of more lipids. So review this picture. It's just a nice visual. In word form, let's compare LDL and HDL. So LDL are carrying lipids in the blood, so are HDL. So the same in that aspect. LDL are much bigger and they are lighter, so they're not quite as heavy, whereas our HDL are much, much smaller and they're more dense. LDL are richer in cholesterol, or richer in those other lipids, whereas our HDL are going to be richer in protein, so they are made of higher protein. So look back at that figure and you can really see that visual difference. LDL is delivering cholesterol to tissues. HDL is going to pick up excess cholesterol and other lipids and take it away from tissues and actually take it to get rid of it from the body. High levels of LDL contribute to an increased risk for heart disease, whereas low levels of HDL increase heart disease risk. So we want to have low LDL levels and high HDL levels. And again, high LDL and low HDL are major risk factors for cardiovascular disease, and both of these are modifiable risk factors, meaning that we can make changes to our diet, to our lifestyle, to our exercise habits to help decrease our risk of cardiovascular disease. Food cholesterol really has minimal impact on blood cholesterol, so while it is important that we don't consume excess cholesterol, most of the cholesterol that we consume is not going to change our blood cholesterol levels too much. However, the other types of fat that we intake will have an impact on our cholesterol within our body. So saturated and trans fat intake, so these are our more bad fats, we would say, those that we want to limit, will actually increase cholesterol more than consuming foods that are rich in cholesterol. However, many of the foods that we're consuming that might be high in cholesterol or might be high in saturated fats are actually probably going to be those that also have the other one in large amounts as well. So the recommended intake for cholesterol is less than 300 milligrams a day for healthy individuals. And for people that already have high cholesterol or have heart disease, the recommendation drops to less than 200 milligrams a day. Again, the major source of cholesterol is going to be animal products. So our meats, cheeses, dairy products, all those are going to have some cholesterol in them. Those products are also going to have amounts of saturated fat. So again, the cholesterol is not what's going to increase your own cholesterol. It's really that saturated fat that probably is playing a role there. Genes may also play a role in your blood cholesterol levels. So some individuals can, have a a perfectly healthy diet. They may eat great, but their cholesterol levels are sky high, and nothing they do will help improve that. So those individuals might need to, take medication to help lower their cholesterol. But the first round of defense should really be to try to make some lifestyle changes, and then if that doesn't work, medication may be helpful. But it is important to recognize that genes may play a role. So some people may be able to eat whatever they want, and their cholesterol will never be impacted. So it really goes both ways. Let's talk about our overall recommendations for fat intake. So what I really want you to take away from this, the topic on fat altogether, is that fat is essential for good health, and it's important to focus on the quality of fat intake because we also need essential fatty acids that's required for all those functions we talked about before. Total fat intake should be between 20 and 35% of total energy intake, so this is our AMDR. Saturated fat intake should be less than 10% of total energy intake. Trans fats should be kept as low as possible, and cholesterol, again, should be less than 300 milligrams a day for healthy individuals. The focus, again, should be on the quality of fat, and so focus on replacing saturated fats with unsaturated fats. Cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death in the US and Canada, and this is mostly related to fat intake or weight status. So high intake of our bad fats, low or poor intake of our good fats, high intake of refined carbohydrates, which is going to be stored as excess is going to be stored as fat, and then overconsumption of calories in general, which can lead to excess weight gain, which can also increase our risk for heart disease. So it's very important to know your numbers. So when you go to the doctor, this is what you should be looking for. You want your total cholesterol to be less than 200 milligrams per deciliter. For HDL, it's protected for women if you're greater than 40 milligrams. For men greater than 40, and for women greater than 50. LDL should be less than 100 milligrams. You can also look at your HDL to LDL ratio. This can be a good indication of heart disease. And then triglycerides should be less than 150. How can you improve your lipid values? Again, our LDL and HDL are modifiable risk factors for heart disease, as is triglyceride. So to lower LDL, decrease total fat intake, you want to stay within the AMDR, so 20 to 35% of calories, because we do need fat. Fat is essential, but we want to focus on the quality again, good fat. So decrease our saturated and trans fat intake. Increase HDL. HDL is really hard to increase by food intake, but physical activity can help to increase HDL, and moderate alcohol consumption. Remember, review what moderate alcohol consumption is, but this may also have a positive effect on increasing HDL. Replacing those solid fats with mono and polyunsaturated fats, and again, focusing on the quality of fat intake is very, very, very important. But the quantity is also important. So even if you only eat good fats, you can still have too much of those good fats. So fats still provide a lot of energy, regardless of whether they're good or bad. So they're going to provide 9 calories per gram. So they're very energy dense. So it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. The quantity is important, and you want to focus on good quality of fats.